what if we could, fundamentally change what it means to be human?
Hmm.
Like, what if we could live way longer, think faster, maybe even reshape our actual bodies?
It sounds like pure science fiction, doesn't it?
It really does, but maybe it's not so far off anymore.
Mm.
Today, we're doing a deep dive into transhumanism. It's this pretty profound philosophical and intellectual movement that seems to be moving from just ideas into, well, actual practice.
Yeah, it's gaining momentum.
So our mission here is to cut through the noise, give you the crucial insights on this, honestly, pretty surprising and often controversial topic. We're pulling from a whole range of sources.
A really comprehensive set, yeah.
Think of this as your express lane to understanding the potential, the dangers, and all the complex ethical stuff it kicks up. Okay, let's unpack this fascinating idea.
It's genuinely compelling. You know, how many different threads of thought from way back in history right up to today's debates all kind of converge on this one concept. Our sources really capture that. History, current arguments, some really wild future ideas. It's expansive, makes you rethink a lot.
It definitely does. Okay, so let's get a baseline. At its core, what is transhumanism exactly?
Okay, so essentially it's a movement pushing for like radical enhancement of the human condition.
A radical enhancement.
Yeah. The idea is to develop and crucially make widely available new future tech, even to seriously boost our longevity, our thinking power, and just our general well-being.
And we're not just talking small tweaks here, are we? Incremental improvements.
No, not at all. Some transhumanists are speculating about transforming us into, well, post-human beings, something fundamentally different from what we are now.
Wow.
But, beyond just personal upgrades, there's another big focus, sometimes overlooked, protecting humanity from existential risks.
Existential risks like what?
We're talking the big stuff, AI going rogue, asteroid hits, that gray goo nightmare scenario with the nanobots.
Right, the self-replicating stuff. Scary.
Exactly. Or pandemics, societal collapse, nuclear war. So it raises this key question, right? Is this all about making ourselves better? Or is it fundamentally about survival?
That's a really interesting split. And what's surprising, like you said, is how old these urges seem to be. You can find similar ideas way back, can't you? Ancient quests for immortality.
Absolutely. Think about the Epic of Gilgamesh.
Right.
Or searches for the Fountain of Youth, the Elixir of Life. These are ancient dreams. Even Dante, in his Paradiso, coined this word transhumanar, basically to transcend human nature.
Huh. So the core idea has been bubbling for centuries.
And what's really striking is how these older ideas kind of foreshadow today's tech goals. Thinkers like Francis Bacon touched on it, and René Descartes way back in 1637.
In his Discourse on Method.
That's the one. He actually envisioned medicine getting so good it could grant physical immortality and stronger minds. He saw science overcoming the body's limits.
So the seeds were planted a long, long time ago. Then you have people like William Godwin arguing for earthly immortality in the 1790s.
Right, and political justice. And his novel, St. Leon, some think it might have influenced Mary Shelley.
Ah, Frankenstein. Makes sense.
Yeah. And there's always debate about Nietzsche's Übermensch, the overhuman. Was that an influence? His focus was more self-actualization, maybe not pure tech, but the links debated.
Okay, so we see these philosophical roots. How did it start solidifying into something more concrete, especially in the 20th century?
Well, you get key figures really laying the groundwork. J.B.S. Haldane, a British geneticist, wrote this essay in 1923, Daedalus, Science in the Future.
What did he predict?
Huge benefits from science applied to human biology. Things like ectogenesis, growing embryos outside the body. Yeah. And he made this great point that big advancements often seem like blasphemy or perversion at first.
That tracks. And then there was J.D. Bernal a few years later.
Yeah, 1929. He speculated about space colonization, but also radical human changes, bionic implants, cognitive enhancement, really pushing the boundaries in his writing.
And Julian Huxley, he's the one who really popularized the term transhumanism, right?
Exactly. In a 1957 essay, he defined it as humanity being able to transcend itself in its entirety. So it wasn't just about individuals, but like the whole species evolving together.
A collective evolution.
Yeah.
Interesting. So ancient ideas, early scientific speculation, the term gets coined. How did this start showing up in like actual culture or movements, especially heading into the 60s?
That's when you see figures like FM 2030 pop up. He actually changed his name from FM Esfandier.
FM 2030. Why?
Well, he saw 2030 as this potential milestone year for an ageless future. He started identifying transhumans as people already adopting technologies and lifestyles that were sort of transitional, bridging the gap to post-humanity.
Got it. And this idea of radical change leads pretty directly to the concept of the technological singularity, doesn't it?
Precisely. That came from I.J. Good, a British cryptologist, back in 1965.
What was his definition?
He talked about an ultra-intelligent machine, something
Yeah.
that could massively outperform any human intellect. And crucially, this machine could design even better machines, which leads to an intelligence explosion. Good called it the last invention that man need ever make.
Whoa, okay. The implications of that are huge. Would we even understand it?
That's the question, isn't it? It forces a total rethink.
So it wasn't just good thinking about this. Who else started exploring where this rapid tech advance could lead, taking it from pure theory towards something more, well, tangible?
Yeah, people like Marvin Minsky, Hans Moravec, Ray Kurzweil, they really ran with these ideas. They blended, serious technical thinking with some pretty bold futuristic speculation.
And wasn't this around the time cryonics started getting attention too?
Exactly. Robert Ettinger's book, The Prospect of Immortality, came out in 1964. That was foundational for cryonics freezing bodies, essentially. Then he wrote Man into Superman in 72.
Okay, so by the 80s, things start getting more organized.
Definitely. The first self-described transhumanists started meeting up, actually, at UCLA. FM 2030 was lecturing there on his third-way futurism. And you had artists like Natasha Vita getting involved early on.
What kind of work?
Well, she made a film in 1980 called Breaking Away, exploring humans breaking free from biological limits. She was very focused on the aesthetic and cultural side of becoming transhuman.
And then nanotechnology enters the picture in a big way.
Right. 1986, Eric Drexler publishes Engines of Creation, all about nanotechnology, molecular assemblers. He also founded the Foresight Institute. And fun fact, the Alcor Life Extension Foundation, the cryonics place, kind of became a meeting spot for these futurists.
A literal hub.
Yeah.
And then Max Moore comes along.
Yeah, in 1990, philosopher Max Moore laid out his principles of extropy. This really defined modern transhumanism, guiding humanity towards a post-human state, but keeping that humanist respect for reason, science, progress, very influential.
And then the World Transhumanist Association, the WTA, was formed.
That was Nick Bostrom and David Pierce in 1998. They also drafted the Transhumanist Declaration.
And what was key about the WTA early on?
Well, one really interesting thing was their immediate concern about access. They worried about enhancement tech creating this huge gap, a genetic divide, Only the rich get the upgrades.
That seems prescient.
It does. They later rebranded as Humanity Plus in 2008, but that focus on equitable access has stuck around. It's a major ethical thread.
That fairness issue is massive, isn't it? If these enhancements become real, who gets them? That shifts the whole debate.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's maybe dig a bit deeper into some core concepts like the relationship between transhumanism and posthumanism. Are they the same thing? Is one part of the other?
Right, because both seem to foresee a future where humanity evolves into something new. An intelligent species beyond human?
There are definitely overlaps, but differences too. Transhumanism tends to focus more on an evolutionary path, right? Seeing the post-human future as a goal, we actively work towards participatory evolution.
We guide our own evolution.
Exactly. That's often different from what's called cultural posthumanism in the arts or humanities, which is often more about critiquing traditional human-centered thinking.
Okay.
And here's a tricky part. Some critics say transhumanism, for all its future talk, might just be extending old ideas about the autonomous individual rather than truly moving beyond them. It raises that dilemma. How much can we change before we're not us anymore?
That is the million-dollar question, yeah.
Yeah.
If you enhance your brain or radically change your body, what happens to your identity, your humanness?
Precisely. Some secular humanists see transhumanism as sort of an offshoot of their own movement, but maybe one that's overly focused on technology, technocentric, and really fixated on overcoming death.
And the aims are distinct, right? That focus on improving the individual human body.
Very much so. There's this strong undercurrent of a kind of ethical duty to improve, to progress, to enter this transhuman phase where we consciously direct our evolution instead of leaving it to nature.
And this ties into Ray Kurzweil's ideas about accelerating change.
Absolutely. Kurzweil believes tech innovation is speeding up so fast we might hit that technological singularity, that intelligence explosion we mentioned, and it could fundamentally change humans. Maybe, he thinks, even in the next few decades.
Wow, that's soon. And didn't Stephen Hawking link this kind of enhancement to our actual survival as a species?
He did. He basically suggested that without designing ourselves either genetically or maybe through brain-computer interfaces, to be smarter and maybe less aggressive, human civilization might just self-destruct. We might be too flawed collectively to handle the power we're developing.
That's a heavy thought. But it's also worth pointing out, not every transhumanist is chasing immortality, right?
Good point. Yeah, there was a survey, and something like nearly a quarter of transhumanists said they didn't want physical immortality.
Why not?
Reasons like potential boredom, worries about overpopulation, or even wanting some kind of afterlife. So, yeah, while radical life extension is huge, it's not the only goal for everyone in the movement.
Okay, let's talk ethics. Transhumanists often push back against the idea of natural being sacred, don't they?
They do. They tend to see natural as a pretty fuzzy concept. They often contrast their view with critics they label bioconservatives or sometimes bioludites, people who argue against messing with our biology.
And the fairness issue comes up again. Unfair human enhancement, like performance-enhancing drugs in sports, but potentially much more profound.
Exactly. That fear of creating two tiers of humanity, maybe even, some speculate, two different species, one vastly advantaged over the other. It's a serious social concern.
How do transhumanists address that inequality risk?
Well, thinkers like Bostrom and Pierce argue for extending moral concern really broadly, not just to all humans, but to all sentient beings. Non-human animals, maybe even AIs or extraterrestrials if we find them. Their goal is incredibly ambitious. Eliminate suffering entirely.
Eliminate all suffering.
That's the ultimate aim for some strands, yeah? Which leads to that crucial question again. How do we make sure enhancement actually benefits everyone, or at least all sentient life, and doesn't just create new hierarchies?
It's clear there's a lot of variety within the movement itself. You've mentioned different currents.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah. You've got abolitionism, which is focused specifically on ending suffering using technology. There's democratic transhumanism, trying to blend these ideas with liberal democracy and ensure fairness.
More or less.
Focus squarely on radical life extension, yeah. Then singularitarianism, people actively working towards or believing in the coming technological singularity. And even techno-Gaianism.
What's that?
Using advanced tech specifically to restore Earth's environment. So lots of different angles and priorities.
What's really compelling about those different currents, like abolitionism wanting to end all suffering, or singularitarians focused on that AI explosion, is how they push boundaries, but sometimes in conflicting ways, you know?
Absolutely. The intense focus on individual immortality might clash with the collective goals of, say, democratic transhumanism trying to ensure fairness for society. It highlights the internal debates.
And surprisingly, maybe, there's an intersection with spirituality, despite the movement often feeling quite secular.
It is surprising, yeah. Mostly the focus is practical, longer, healthier lives. But some transhumanists are pursuing hopes that sound traditionally religious, like literal immortality. You see that in groups like realism, for instance. And there's also some fringe speculation about using like neurotheology or neurotech to achieve deeper self-knowledge, maybe even spiritual states.
Which brings us to wilder ideas like mind uploading.
Exactly. The theory of transferring your consciousness into computer hardware. Think about Frank Tipler's omega point idea.
Remind me.
His proposal was that as the universe collapses, it could create conditions where all consciousness could be preserved and run in a giant simulation, achieving a sort of post-human godhood.
Wow, that sounds intense. Almost like Teilhard de Chardin's noosphere concept, but taken to an extreme cosmic level.
Yeah, there are parallels drawn there, that idea of a collective consciousness. Tipler's omega point is like the ultimate version of that.
But there must be pushback, especially from religious perspectives.
Oh, definitely. Christian critiques, for example, often argue mind uploading devalues the physical body, maybe linking it to older Gnostic ideas where the material world is seen as flawed or evil. There's an ongoing, sometimes tense, dialogue between transhumanism and various faiths.
And studies show less religious people are more open to it.
Generally, yes. Studies tend to show a negative correlation between how religious someone is and how likely they are to accept transhumanist ideas. At the end of the day, it forces this profound rethink of what life and consciousness even are. Questions that used to belong only to religion or philosophy.
Okay, so let's shift from the deep theory. How are these ideas actually being put into practice? You mentioned enhancing the nervous system earlier.
Right. Now, this is where it gets really interesting, kind of blurring that line between sci-fi and reality. Kevin Warwick's experiment back in 2002.
Tell me about that.
He had this array of 100 electrodes surgically implanted in his arm nerve fibers. It linked his nervous system directly to a computer.
Seriously, what could he do?
He could control a robot hand just by thinking, wow, essentially through his neural signals. And even wilder, he electronically communicated signals between his nervous system and his wife's after she also got implants, a direct neural link.
That's incredible. But maybe on a more everyday level, lots of people are already engaging in basic transhumanism, aren't they? Even if they don't call it that.
Absolutely. Think about cosmetic surgery purely for aesthetics. Or athletes using human growth hormones, even common things like cognitive enhancers, Ritalin, Adderall, or lifestyle drugs like Viagra or Botox used to maintain youthfulness. These are all ways people are already using tech to modify the natural human state.
And what about more extreme examples like that artist with the antenna?
Ah, Neil Harbisson. Yeah, he's a self-described cyborg artist. He has an antenna permanently implanted in his skull.
What does it do?
It allows him to sense colors beyond the normal human spectrum infrareds, ultraviolets, translating them into audible vibrations he perceives. It's a powerful example of what's called morphological freedom.
Morphological freedom.
Yeah, the idea that individuals should have the right to modify their own bodies however they choose.
Got it. And this ties into that NBIC convergence idea.
Exactly. Nano, bio, info, nanotechnology, biotechnology, information technology, cognitive science. The idea is that these fields are converging and that synergy could unlock truly transformative future tech.
Like what kind of tech?
Well, the hypothetical stuff. Really immersive, simulated realities, full mind uploading like we discussed, maybe making cryonics actually reversible and effective.
And it's not just individuals pursuing this. Governments are involved too.
Yeah, the U.S. Department of Defense, for example, has sponsored research into creating super soldiers.
Seriously.
Things like enabling soldiers to stay effective in combat for, say, 168 hours straight without sleep. It raises huge questions about military applications, obviously. The ethics, the potential arms race in human enhancement. It's a major area of concern.
Understandably. I mean, the whole concept of human enhancement is just inherently controversial, isn't it? It sparks intense debate, both practical and ethical.
Absolutely. It's definitely a hot-button issue.
What about feasibility? Are these goals even realistic?
Well, there's skepticism there, too. Back in '92, sociologist Max Dublin pointed to all the failed tech predictions of the past. He saw transhumanism as driven by scientism, fanaticism, and nihilism. Pretty strong words.
Wow.
And Gregory Stock, who's actually quite sympathetic to enhancement overall, is still skeptical about widespread cyborgization like everyone getting implants. He thinks biological tweaks, genetics, metabolism are more likely pathways in the near term.
And philosopher Mary Midgley had criticisms too.
Also 92, yeah. She saw the quest for immortality specifically as kind of quasi-scientific dreams, self-indulgent power fantasies, basically, driven by fear of death.
Then there's the allogeneic critique. What's that?
That comes from Jeremy Rifkin and Stuart Newman. They focus on the sheer unpredictability of messing with genetics. They point out that things like cloning or altering genes in embryos are often really error-prone, disruptive. It raises a fundamental question. Can we really control the biological outcomes when we start tinkering at that level?
Do transhumanists have answers for that kind of uncertainty?
They try. James Hughes suggests we could use super powerful computer models of the human genome to simulate genetic changes first, maybe speed up testing and approval safely.
Okay.
And Gregory Stock has mentioned artificial chromosomes as potentially safer, more precise way to do genetic engineering than current methods.
What about outright moral objections? Religious groups must have strong views.
Oh, definitely. The Vatican, for instance, in 2002, explicitly called changing our fundamental genetic identity radically immoral. And the idea of creating a superhuman being, unthinkable, they said, a violation of human dignity.
And critiques about how we view the body, seeing it just as a machine.
Right, that instrumental conception of the human body. Some worry we'll just see people as objects to be optimized, fixed, upgraded. Feminist thinkers like Susan Bordeaux connect this to wider societal pressures, especially around body image and perfection for everyone.
Then there's the big one, losing our human identity.
Yeah, that's a core fear. Bill McKibben argued back in 2003 that if we remove our basic human limitations, mortality, physical constraints, cognitive limits, we might remove the very things that give life meaning. If everything's possible, does choice still matter? He pointed to groups like the Amish who deliberately limit technology to preserve their way of life.
So the argument is our limits define us.
In a way, yes. That our struggles and limitations are what create the context for value and meaning. It really gets to the heart of what makes us human.
And that naturally leads to fears about blurring the lines, creating, well, monsters. Like in Frankenstein or Blade Runner, human clones, human-animal chimeras, things that feel fundamentally unnatural or wrong.
That yuck factor is powerful. But there are counter-arguments. Ronald Bailey points out McKibben's Amish example isn't perfect. Some Amish communities do use advanced medicine like gene therapy for certain diseases. And he argues that meaning is subjective. People find it in all sorts of ways, limitations or not. Plus, Woody Evans makes the point that even if we created self-aware clones or chimeras, they'd just be unique individuals deserving rights. He challenges us to get past the yuck factor and what he calls human racism.
Okay, shifting gears slightly. Socioeconomic impacts, the Gattaca scenario, right? The genetic haves and have-nots.
Exactly. That's a huge, persistent fear. That enhancement tech would just massively widen the gap between rich and poor, creating this rigid genetic divide.
How do proponents respond to that, especially the more democratically minded ones?
Well, democratic transhumanists like James Hughes argue for policies to ensure access. Things like a universal healthcare voucher system that could cover enhancement tech.
Why not just ban it to prevent the divide?
Their argument is that banning it won't work. It'll just drive it underground, make it unsafe, or ensure only the rich can get it through black markets or going abroad. So they argue making it legal, regulated, and accessible is actually the fairer route. But how to actually ensure that equitable access? That's the billion-dollar question.
Francis Fukuyama famously called transhumanism the world's most dangerous idea. Why?
Back in 2004, yeah. His fear was that it would fundamentally alter human nature in ways that could undermine the very basis of liberal democracy, which he argued relies on a certain shared human equality.
And Jürgen Habermas had similar concerns about altering embryos.
Yes, in 2003. He argued that genetically programming someone at the embryo stage undermines their future autonomy and violates a kind of species ethic, the unspoken understanding that we all start from a biologically unchosen place. It messes with the foundations of our moral community, he thought.
But again, there are counters.
Ronald Bailey, for instance, argues political equality is based on rights, not biology. He claims genetic engineering could even reduce inequality by making desirable traits more widely available instead of just relying on the genetic lottery.
What about the shadow of eugenics? That history looms large.
It does, and it's something transhumanists are very aware of. Major organizations are explicit. They condemn the coercive, racist, classist eugenics of the past completely.
So what do they advocate for instead?
They talk about a new eugenics or germinal choice. The key difference being it must be voluntary and aimed at maximizing public health and minimizing genetic inequalities, not creating some master race. But of course, the term itself is incredibly loaded.
Understandably. Okay, what about existential risks? Could the tech itself be dangerous?
That's Martin Rees's big warning. The British Astronomer Royal argued in 2003 that powerful new tech inherently brings huge risks of disaster alongside opportunity. He called for much tighter controls, maybe even rethinking scientific openness, invoking the precautionary principle.
Which basically says, if you don't know the risks, go slow.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
But transhumanists often argue the precautionary principle is too paralyzing, unrealistic even. They propose something called differential technological development. Meaning we should actively try to slow down potentially harmful technologies while simultaneously accelerating beneficial ones, especially tech that could protect us from risks like AI safety research or asteroid defense.
Interesting distinction. And there are even debates about birth rates.
Yeah, a bit niche, but some see antinatalism discouraging having kids as an obstacle to achieving a post-human future, while others might argue for pronatalism encouraging more births to ensure humanity continues towards that goal.
Finally, you mentioned the term transhumanism itself is sometimes used differently, co-opted.
Yeah, that's a really fascinating and maybe disturbing recent trend. The word transhumanism is being picked up by various, often anti-democratic groups as a kind of bogeyman.
Like who?
You see it used by some Putin sympathizers, radical anti-vax movements, certain Christian fundamentalist groups. They use transhumanism as this label for a perceived enemy, a sort of common enemy stereotype.
Why? What does it represent to them?
It's become a shorthand, an ideological rallying point against liberal democracies, against modernity, against perceived Western decline or globalist agendas. They paint it as this sinister force trying to destroy traditional values, religion, and human nature itself.
So they're using the term to unite diverse groups against a shared perceived threat.
Exactly. It's a potent narrative, even if it massively distorts what transhumanism in its philosophical sense is actually about. It shows how resonant and maybe how scary these ideas ideas are in the broader culture.
Wow. We've covered an incredible amount of ground today. Seriously. From those ancient dreams of immortality.
Right up to cutting-edge tech aspirations.
And the formalization of the movement, the key thinkers, the organizations. We've looked at how it relates to posthumanism, its core goals, and plunged into those deep ethical debates.
And we saw how these aren't just abstract ideas anymore. Neural implants, genetic discussions, even everyday lifestyle choices touch on this. Plus, all those critical counter-arguments, is it feasible? What about identity, fairness, democracy? It really challenges everything.
And understanding this stuff, it isn't just theoretical, is it? It helps you, the listener, make sense of the world we're living in, where that line between us and our tech gets blurrier all the time.
So it's happening now.
As technology keeps accelerating, we're not just watching this unfold. We're participants, increasingly, in our own evolution. So maybe the final thought to leave you with is this. What kind of future will you choose to design? Not just for ourselves, but for all sentient beings and for the generations still to come.